Tier 5 awareness, transhumans, Homo Evolutis, or Homo Laptopicus. In this stage of our emergent consciousness, we become adept manipulators. At the low end of Tier 5 life forms, we have doctors, psychologists, lawyers, politicians, and so on. At the high end, we have lobbyists, global elitists, and/or Wall Street corporate types, and sometimes certain psychologists reach this point as well. Again, I'm generalizing. Remember what we learned from the last video in this series. Tier 5 is a product of divergence in our species. It's the abstract problem-solving phenotype expressions that evolved right next to the Tier 4 imagination phenotype expression. There is a drastic difference between Tier 4 and Tier 5. The difference is a matter of complexity. A Tier 5 has added further complexity to the Tier 4 abstract problem-solving phenotype expressions. Rather than manipulating a cow, a Tier 5 will manipulate a Tier 4. At the high end of Tier 5s, they will manipulate an entire city or even an entire nation. A Tier 5's ability to track cause and effect drastically exceeds that of a Tier 4. A Tier 5 tracks multiple complex cause and effect chains through a very large mental mapping of an environment. Tier 5s have an increased ability to simulate perceptual paradigms of more simple forms of our consciousness. For example, a Tier 5 can put themselves in a Tier 4's shoes in order to understand what they want to hear so they can be manipulated. For example, politicians use propaganda and the corporate types use advertising. Additionally, psychology is often weaponized by Tier 5s for the purpose of other more subtle or more aggressive control and manipulations of Tier 4s, even other Tier 5s. All the while, Tier 4 has no idea they're being manipulated. Often they think they're benefiting, oddly enough. Much like a cow likely thinks they're getting a good deal because the Tier 4 feeds them and protects them from predators. Which in some ways, I suppose that is a good deal. It's a matter of how much abuse is occurring in each given interaction or whatever opinionated perspective we'd like to insert. Once a Tier 5 begins to become a transhuman, they begin to make their own rules and surpass biology. Body modifications and merging with technology are examples of this transhumanism. This is further divergence in our species. Sometimes examples of this are as simple as tattoos or piercings. More complexly, we see adaptations of technology into the body, like a pacemaker or an insulin pump. An extreme example of surpassing biology would be a sex change. Then there are other more subtle transhuman disagreements with biology that are solved by manipulating our biochemistry with drugs. I'm going to save up for robot legs. It's a risky operation, but it'll be worth it. Just kidding. And don't ask me how much clothes cost in the Matrix. I have no idea. Is money even real? On a more serious note, I am more than ready to merge my mind with computers. As soon as that technology is safe, I'm all for it. I don't care if the world can read my mind. That will just save all of us time. Something that is similar, if not the same, between Tier 4 and Tier 5 life forms is their perception of reality in regards to the self. In those states of consciousness, we are individualistic. There is a difference in the level of ego because of the observations and inequalities between mental abilities that Tier 5 perceive to have over a Tier 4. But for the most part, there isn't much difference in their perceptions of reality, except that a Tier 4 chooses religion and/or gods to explain their existence, while a Tier 5 will often use logic and science over religion. Ultimately, they still come up with about the same perception of reality though, which is an overly simplistic perception of excessive individualism. Most Tier 5 life forms will become comfortable with whatever speciality they've adapted. They are surviving both from a biological perspective and a social standpoint. There is no need to evolve. But I think it's likely that many Tier 5s have the ability for expanded consciousness. As to what makes them break free from the gravity of their awareness is a topic for another video. At any rate, sometimes it happens and a Tier 5 becomes a Tier 6. Something to keep in mind is that Tier 4, 5, and 6 can all breed, but it is very rare that they will choose to do so. Sex aside, overall compatibility between forms of consciousness will be dictated by the abilities for reciprocal empathy. If there is no reciprocal empathy, then incentives have been removed. Here's an explanation. The more complex thought processes become, then the less a Tier 5 empathizes with a Tier 4, and this is largely because the Tier 4 has no ability to empathize with the complexity level of a Tier 5. If there's no reciprocal empathy, then there is no incentive for the Tier 5 to empathize with the Tier 4, as they will not receive a return on that investment. This furthers the divergence of our species and gives birth to the elites. As all of the states of consciousness interact with the ever-growing combined knowledge pool, this yields another level of consciousness. Yet again, a product of emergence. This is where a Tier 5 becomes a Tier 6. Okay, that will suffice for an understanding of Tier 5 awareness for now. Don't allow your focus to falter, it's about to get weird, and then it will be time for brain cake, so stay tuned for the next video in the series, where we will cover further divergence referred to as transcendence, and what I call Tier 6 consciousness. I know this is tough, you're doing great, thanks for making an effort, and again, subscribe, thumb up, and share. Thanks for joining the Thought Revolution. See you in the next video.